Let's jump to a landlocked country in Asia, Mongolia. The country that used to have an empire stretching from Gulf of Finland to the borders of Vietnam. Mongolia is such an interesting country with a nomadic lifestyle and where you hear someone throat singing, literally. Mongolia doesn't have many neighbors, but due to the legacy of the empire and communism years, it had a lot of connections with many countries. Let's locate where Mongolia is on the map first, shall we? Mongolia is a landlocked country in Central East Asia, with the capital Ulaanbaatar, meaning Red Hero. The city itself holds 1.45 million people out of Mongolia's 3.15 million people, or 46% of the entire country's population. Speaking of population, it has the lowest population density of 2 per kilometer squared. Yes, 2. Its language is Mongolian, a Mongolic language written in Cyrillic script, influenced by... we'll talk about it later. Mongolia is what it is today because the land is not suitable for significant agriculture, meaning that its culture is mostly nomadic, centered around pastures full of grazing animals. Geographically, much of southeastern Mongolia lies in the Gobi Desert, and the remaining areas are mostly flat plains suitable for nomadic pastures to thrive with the exception of some mountain ranges. Mongolia has very few immediate neighbors, and both happen to become some of the largest countries in the world, China and Russia. Mongolia almost bordered Kazakhstan to the west, but this short corridor between Russia and China does not make it happen. Mongolia's immediate neighbor to the south is the massive People's Republic of China. Much of northern China is similar to the Mongols in looks than those who live in the south. Today, Mongolia is technically Outer Mongolia, in which Inner Mongolia is located today in China. Relations date back a long time ago in the ancient times, in which the Han Chinese and the Proto-Mongols, the ancestors of today's Mongolians, are already in contact. The Chinese were already civilized while the Mongols were nomadic. As a result, the nomadic Mongols would raid and attack Chinese frontiers to the north. The Xiongnu would be a notable one, as they inhabit the lands of today's Mongolia. The Great Wall was constructed to ward off these attacks, which became one of the most notable sites worldwide. A certain Mongolian guy named Temujin, known famously as Genghis Khan, conquered all of China in 1279. At this point onwards, the Mongols ruled vast lands in Eurasia, but most of them who ruled China adopted Chinese customs, which later became Yuan dynasty under Kublai Khan. The Mongols were kicked out of China when the Ming dynasty took over. When the Manchus took over China and declared the Qing dynasty, all of today's Mongolia was also incorporated. After the Qing dynasty fell, Mongolia declared itself independent. The Chinese still claimed it as part of their territory, but they lost control due to civil wars and the rise of regional warlords back then in China. China took it back in 1920, but was driven out with Soviet support next year. China later recognized Mongolia as independent after World War II due to Soviet pressure. When Sino-Soviet split happened, Mongolia was sandwiched between two massive communist powers, but Mongolia opted to stay loyal to the Soviet Union, leading to security concerns in China. Relations warmed significantly when Soviet control gradually waned, and especially after the USSR collapsed. In 1994, both countries signed a treaty of friendship and cooperation, emphasizing Chinese acknowledgement of Mongolian independence. Today, economic ties are very close. China has become Mongolia's biggest trade partner and source of foreign investment. China also offered to allow the use of its Tianjin port for Mongolia to gain access to trade in the Pacific. China also expanded its investments in Mongolia's mining industries, giving it access to the country's natural resources. Culturally, the Mongolians in Outer Mongolia are obviously the closest to the Mongols in China's Inner Mongolia, in which the latter actually has more population and even write in the traditional Mongol script. Mongolia and Russia have been traditionally close since the 20th century, but it goes all the way back to the age of the Mongol Empire, when it began expanding westward towards Europe. The Kievan Rus was the immediate frontliner that faced the Mongol invasions, but the Mongols successfully conquered much of it, reaching it as far as Gulf of Finland. The Slavic principalities had been highly influenced by Mongol and Tatar customs and culture, and the Mongols later contributed to the rise of Muscovy, which would later become the Russian Empire. Fast forward to the 1920s, Mongolia is fighting for independence against China, and the Bolsheviks came in to aid Mongolia. In 1921, the Mongolian People's Republic was declared as a communist satellite state of the USSR. Mongolia, though, was severely underdeveloped at the time, but the economy started to develop with Soviet support and they began the process of gradually moving to industrialization. The Cyrillic script was introduced as a new writing script for Mongolian language, replacing the old Mongolian script. Mongolia later joined World War II supporting the Soviets, became heavily involved in the Soviet invasion of Manchuria against the Japanese forces, but all of Manchuria, including Inner Mongolia, is to become part of China, in exchange of China recognizing Mongolian independence. As mentioned during the Sino-Soviet split, Mongolia was in a tough position as China had been increasing economic influence, but it stayed loyal to the USSR and Soviet troops were deployed near the Mongolian-Chinese border. More Soviet integration contributed to the industrialization of the country and significant economic improvement. Mongolia became a bone of contention between the Soviet Union and China following the Sino-Soviet split because of the presence of the Soviet nuclear arms. When the USSR collapsed, economic support stopped and Mongolia pursued closer relations with China. When Putin came to power, relations started to grow and they renewed a major bilateral treaty and economic support began to flow in. Today, both are still very close economically. Culturally, Mongolia is closest to the Russian Republic of Buryatia, basically brothers but they lie on Lake Baikal. Kalmykia, another Russian republic, are related but very distant, in which it is located all the way west to the European part of Russia, making it the only Buddhist majority area in Europe. Tuva in Russia are also very close, in which they share their throat singing stories. Though Tuva's language is a bit more distinctive, it's Turkic, but still, it counts. These republics of Russia are mostly due to the legacy of Mongol Empire or they're just neighbors. Mongolia's location and legacy of the empire, despite only having two neighbors, allowed close relations with distant Asian countries. Its alignment with the Soviet bloc in the past also created friends along with other Soviet bloc countries. Within East Asia, Mongolia has significant ties with the Koreans, both north and south. The Mongol Empire conquered all of Korean Peninsula and the ruling Goryeo dynasty there formed an alliance with Kublai Khan afterwards in order to invade Japan. And what could possibly go wrong? Let's see later. fast forward to 1945, Korean Peninsula is divided between the Communist North and the anti-Communist South. Obviously, the Communist Mongolia will side with the Communist North, and it was the second country to recognize North Korea after the Soviet Union. Mongolia provided assistance to North Korea during the Korean War, although it did not directly participate. And it also contributed to the post-war reconstruction of the DPRK. The relations go up and down depending on the time. Relations collapsed when Mongolia turned away from communism, but both countries began to improve relations significantly. The issue of North Korean refugees in Mongolia remains a sensitive topic though. With South Korea, things aren't friendly until the fall of communism. Since then, both countries are friendly, in which Mongolians are the largest foreign population in South Korea. With Japan, you all know what happened in the 13th century. The Mongols tried to invade Japan twice, but with the second invasion being one of the largest naval invasions in the world at that time. But well, some angry warrior, known as kamikaze, spared Japan from these invasions. Fast forward, like South Korea, relations improved after communism years. With the Republic of China, known as Taiwan, it didn't recognize Mongolia and still claimed it as part of its territory until 2002. Mongolia recognizes the People's Republic of China as the real legitimate China. However, like with most countries, unofficial bilateral relations do exist, and trade and cooperation still progresses. The Mongols have influenced vast cultures during the Empire days, such as the Indians, the Turks, the Persians, etc. Hence, all of them have a soft spot in Mongolia. Kazakhstan is also very close, despite being Turkic. They share the same horseback and historically nomadic lifestyle. Ethnic Kazakhs make up the largest minority in Mongolia. Due to communism years, Mongolia has extremely close relations with Bulgaria and Czechoslovakia, both Soviet bloc countries. During the latter period of the Cold War, Czechoslovakia and Bulgaria were the second and the largest trading partners of Mongolia, respectively, despite its sheer distance. The fall of communism marked a significant blow to the trade relations, mainly because of distance, as mentioned earlier, but both countries' relations with Mongolia have been turning up since then. Oh, by the way, Bulgaria had long contact with Mongolians since early ages, Middle Ages, I think. So yeah, Mongolia is often seen today as a buffer state between two massive giants, Russia and China, and it makes sense, as a significant portion of Chinese-European trade goes to here and Russia. Mongolia's legacy of the empire also brought major influences in vast lands to Eurasia. However, Mongolia did become isolated at several points in history, as it is sandwiched between huge masses of land, especially during the advent of the 19th and 20th century. Today though, Mongolia is a vast country trying to shape its international relations. Appreciate the fact that Mongolia shaped world history at one point, and without it, Marco Polo's prestige would never be seen today in modern history. And that's it for today. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my channel. And thank you.